Okay, so picture this. A Somali-run daycare in Minnesota gets broken into. At first glance, it really looks like a targeted hate crime. But the timing, it's just a little too convenient. See, this whole thing went down right in the middle of a massive investigation into daycare fraud. So what are we looking at here? A malicious attack? Or a really, really clever deception?
So this is the core claim right from the daycare's manager. He holds a press conference and says, look, the thieves weren't after cash or computers, no. He claimed they were after something way more specific. He said they took, and I'm quoting here, important documentation, enrollment of the children, and also employee documentation. So in other words, the exact paper trail that would be at the very heart of a fraud investigation.
And that right there brings us to the central question of this whole story. Are we looking at a targeted, hate-fueled attack on a vulnerable community? Or is this a super convenient disappearance of evidence? A staged event designed to destroy records and get everyone on their side. Let's break down the arguments for both sides.
All right, so first up, let's dive into the incident from the daycare's perspective. They held that press conference and they laid out their version of events. They really painted a picture of a deliberate, frightening act of destruction and intimidation.
So, according to the manager, here's how it all went down. He says a suspect smashed through a wall from the store next door, forced open the office doors, and then, get this, selectively targeted their records. We're talking child enrollment files, employee documents, and they even ripped up the checkbooks. And to back this all up, they said they'd been getting these hateful, threatening voicemails, basically framing this break-in as the climax of a whole campaign of harassment. But, it didn't take long for this official story to come under some serious scrutiny. Almost immediately, online commentators and critics started picking the whole thing apart. They were pointing out all these inconsistencies and pretty much saying the break-in was just, a little too convenient to be real.
Yeah, and this quote from commentator Anton Daniels just perfectly captures the mood of the skeptics. There was this growing feeling that, hey, wait a minute, are we being played here? So what were the specific details that got everyone so suspicious?
For the skeptics, the whole story just didn't add up, and it really boiled down to these 4 key points. First, the timing. I mean, come on, this happened right when the heat on this daycare fraud stuff was at its absolute peak. Second, the stolen items. A burglar ignores valuables and just takes paperwork? Really? Third, their response. Why hold a big press conference right away? It kind of feels like you're more worried about public opinion than a police investigation. And finally, here's a weird one. This specific daycare wasn't even named in the original videos that started this whole thing. So why them? Okay, so now let's dig into the actual evidence. Or, the lack of it. We're going to look at 3 key points where the official story and what the skeptics are saying just completely collide.
First up, let's talk about the point of entry. This is the most visual piece of evidence we've got. The daycare manager's claim was that a suspect destroyed the wall to come in.
And yeah, for a lot of people, this is where the story really starts to fall apart. You've got 2 totally different takes on the same wall. On one side, you have the manager saying a suspect destroyed the wall. But on the other, you've got critics saying, and I love this quote, "You couldn't fit a squirrel through that hole in the wall, let alone an adult male." I mean, that visual difference became a massive, massive problem for their story. All right, next up, let's circle back to what was supposedly stolen. For a lot of people questioning the daycare story, this might be the most suspicious part of the whole thing. And this really lays out the 2 opposing ways of looking at this. The daycare says, see, they stole our documents. It proves this was a targeted attack. But the critics are like, hold on a second. They see a much simpler motive. I mean, if you're being investigated for fraud, what's the easiest way to make the evidence disappear? You just claim someone stole it. And finally, let's talk about the police report. You'd think the story you tell the cops would be pretty clear and consistent right from the get-go, right? Well, that's not exactly what happened here. So during that press conference, a reporter asks a question that really puts the manager on the spot. And suddenly, this huge inconsistency comes to light. A major difference between what he was telling the public and what the police were apparently told at first. And wow, this is a big one. It's a major contradiction. On one side, you've got a police spokesperson confirming that the initial report said, and I quote, there was no loss and that nothing was taken. But on the other side, you have the manager's explanation. He says, well, we told him we were going to check everything out and call him back with a list.
To the skeptics, that didn't sound like a traumatized victim. It sounded a lot like someone making up a story as they went along. Now, to really get why this one little break-in blew up into such a massive controversy, we have to zoom out. Because this wasn't just some isolated incident. Nope. This was a flashpoint in a much, much bigger story. A huge statewide investigation. Yeah, this whole thing did not happen in a vacuum. It was all unfolding against the backdrop of a massive federal and state investigation into daycare fraud. We're talking about allegations of hundreds of millions, maybe even billions, of taxpayer dollars being stolen through fake claims, mostly within the Somali community. So when you get right down to it, everything boils down to these two completely opposite stories. Narrative number one, this is a community under siege, the target of racist attacks that are being fueled by this investigation. Narrative number two, this is all a cover-up, an attempt to flip the script, make perpetrators look like victims, and completely derail a legitimate investigation into massive fraud. But look, beyond the whole debate of what really happened, the human cost of this incident has been undeniably real. The tensions have just escalated and created this climate of genuine fear, with accusations and threats flying from all sides. At that same press conference, one mother got up and talked about being genuinely afraid for her family's safety. She said, "My kids see what's on the news, and they're asking me what can we do now that they know our information and our home addresses." I mean, that really highlights the very real anxiety that's just rippling through the community. But the threats aren't just one-sided. The independent investigator whose videos first brought these fraud allegations into the spotlight, a guy named Nick Shirley, has also reportedly been getting death threats for his work. It just goes to show you how incredibly high the stakes have become for literally everyone involved. And all of this leaves us with some really tough questions, doesn't it? In a climate that's this intense and emotional, where do you draw the line between a necessary investigation and, harassment that puts an entire community on edge? And then there's the other side of that coin. How do we tell the difference between a community's genuine cry for help and a deliberate act of deception designed to escape accountability? In this case, the truth, whatever it is, seems to be buried under layers and layers of accusations and controversy. And it really just leaves all of us to wonder,